Hello, everyone.
Hi,
Already got some people hanging out in the chat with us.
which is always nice.
Welcome to this week's Port Haven StreamCast. Again,
Woohoo.
the thing that we do regularly every week since we started.
Yep,
Um,
we've never missed a week, and it's always on the same day.
yep. I mean, it's not our fault if you didn't know that, or or if for some reason YouTube doesn't show you that. It has nothing to do with the regularity of our streamcast, but we're glad you're here with us today. So we are here today. We haven't done this in a while, actually, but we want to have a chat about Star Wars Resistance, the new animated show.
Yes.
So we talked a lot about this on our streamcast when it first got announced, but we really haven't done a streamcast on it since the show started.
Right.
So you've done some reviews, both spoiler free and spoiler ish,
Mm-hmm.
and you covered some of the new stuff as it was coming out, the Team Fireball video and the Aces video as they got published on Star Wars YouTube channel. But
Mm-hmm.
but we've not really had a long form discussion about Resistance yet, so that's what we want to do today. Has anybody in the chat seen Resistance? I
Or at
know.
least up to date. It sounds like B-Man Entertainment was watching it, but might be an episode behind. It's a little bit hard whenever somebody asks me like what episode number we're on. There's a little bit of confusion because the Recruit, the pilot episode, is 2 episodes.
Right.
That they put together. So some people think that this past week's was episode 6 because they count Recruit as 1 and 2.
Right.
And but I've been kind of looking at it as 5 because the Recruit is 1, because that's how it's listed on Disney XD, Disney Go, there, which is how I've been watching them.
Right.
This past one, The Children of Tahar, was listed as episode 5.
Right.
So, like, I don't know, but our buddies Tatooine Sons would probably refer to this as episode 6. I was watching them, listening to them do a podcast a couple days back, and they seemed very adamantly against my labeling system.
Yeah. Well, that's true of so many shows that will do like a 2-part pilot, and then they're inconsistent with whether or not that counts as 1 episode or 2. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the Recruit is just 1 episode.
Yeah.
There's also a difference in like when stuff airs also.
Yeah.
So like it's become available online before it airs on the airwaves as it was. Not that there's like airwaves for anything but network television anymore. And then like the UK airing schedule is different too.
Yes.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, B-Man. I use the Disney Now app, and they call the pilot just episode 1, but then they're numbering all the rest of them like as if it was 2, and it's just confusion abounds all around.
I mean, for anytime a series starts with episode 4, I feel like all subsequent material is bound to be confusing.
Yeah, Neil and Noland.
Hello and welcome, friends.
Yeah, all sorts of people showing up for our streamcast today.
It's probably what happens when we actually schedule it ahead of time.
Yeah. The last one got scheduled ahead of time like 5 minutes before it started.
We are the most professional Star Wars streamers anywhere.
Yeah, making that big dollar money on the Port Haven channel.
Disney just sends us a check every week.
Yep, in the pocket of Big Mickey.
Yep.
Getting that Kathleen Kennedy dollar bills.
You know it.
But I will say, since not everybody has seen all of the episodes, there is I don't want to say a certainty, but we may talk about things that, I mean, it's hard to talk about the show in specifics without getting somewhat spoilery. So
yes.
We might try to avoid the specifics of the most recent episode if we can. But we're talking about stuff that has happened across the episodes.
Right.
So be
Fair warning.
yeah, just be kind of aware about that. Um, I mean, you could go watch the most recent episode in the time that we're streaming and just catch up with us at the end if that's what you really wanted to do.
Watch the stream in double speed.
Yeah, but before we start talking about some specifics, and we have a couple of things that we want to hit kind of
Hmm.
specifically, what are just your general impressions of the show so far?
I've been really impressed. So if you watch my video on Team Fireball and the Aces, I
Right.
said in both videos that I was anticipating like the first season being fine
Mm-hmm.
and that it would grow on me and like season 2 would be awesome, which is what happened with Clone Wars, is what happened with Rebels. They
Right.
had good episodes, but overall it was like an okay first season, and then it hit the ground running the second season.
Right.
I've really, really been impressed with it this season. And this is something I kind of touched upon in some of my reviews. I haven't had the chance to really kind of explain in more detail. But in the event you haven't watched those reviews, what I think works is there's still the kind of quote unquote juvenile humor, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah.
There's still the slapstick humor. There's still the kind of like dumb gags. Niku, who I adore, he has the very kind of obvious, like if Drax was a nice person and not like an assassin, like that kind of humor.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it works because this is the first time we've been watching a Star Wars cartoon series that's set during peacetime, or at least a Cold War time.
Right.
So them kind of being more lighthearted and not being, burned by the horrors of war kind of makes sense.
Right.
We're decades since Return of the Jedi, and as far as we know, there hasn't been a massive galactic scale war since then.
Right.
So I don't think it's that they changed the humor style as much as they took the humor style they wanted and put it in an appropriate setting. And it's been really, really working for the series.
Right.
And I think there's been like maybe one filler episode out of the 5, which is really impressive to me too. They're just kind
Right.
of getting right into the story.
Well, and I'll say kind of two things to that. One, I know you and I are both big fans of Bloodline, and we've talked about that extensively in other places,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't get leading up to The Force Awakens, and maybe that's because The Force Awakens didn't do as good of a job as it might have in kind of hitting this note. But like a lot of people in the Republic either don't acknowledge that the First Order is a thing, or don't
Right.
acknowledge the extent to which they ought to be concerned about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that Leia in particular kind of has a problem with, and that's why she forms the Resistance in the first place and kind of leaves her post in the New Republic to become General Organa. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that we get this in that moment, where if
Right.
this was set after The Force Awakens, and if it continues after The Force Awakens, it will, I think, be a very different kind of thing than it is now. Whereas with Rebels, like the Empire was already a thing, and we're seeing a fledgling resistance cell, but
Mm-hmm.
the terms of the universe were already cast in pretty starkly in a way that's just not true of this Cold War, as you say,
Mm-hmm.
between the First Order and the Resistance and the Republic, kind of as a three-way kind of thing, because Kaz
Mm-hmm.
starts off as a Republic
Yes.
um, pilot, and so he's being recruited by the Resistance from the New Republic, which I imagine is true of a lot of Resistance pilots and other personnel. But there's that. So I like that too. I like kind of where it's set. I like how it allows it to have a more lighthearted tone that doesn't feel like in contrast to everything. But I also think that the setting of it, which is the other thing I was going to say, allows it to kind of be separate because
Mm-hmm.
it's on this Colossus station, which is not Coruscant, it's not
Right.
Jakku, it's not Starkiller Base, like it's not a planet controlled by anybody. It's not a Republic planet. It's not a Resistance planet. It's not a First Order planet. It's just this station that's a thing of its own, which allows it to kind of be a setting apart from the conflict that we know is coming.
Right.
So I've really liked the show so far too. And the other thing I was going to say is I think you're right that there's only been one episode that really counts as filler, but I don't know that I would even count it as filler to the extent that everything is so new that every episode we get is more information about the characters than we had before. Like
right.
It speaks more to who they are and their motivations and their interaction, even if it's not about the First Order and the Resistance.
Yeah, the episode I had in mind is I believe was called "Fuel for the Fire." It was the one that had Elijah Wood in it, and even then, where the story felt like filler, it had really important character moments. You know, we learned more about Yeager's past and that he. I mean, I think we kind of already knew he was with the rebellion anyway, just the way Poe talks to him.
Right.
But like Kaz learns about it, and we learned that Yeager used to have a family, and that sort of thing. And so there's still value that gets put into the episode. So even if it is just kind of a breather, get to know Kaz and see what he's up to, they still put all this kind of like other relevant information in it.
Yep. Yeah, Neil, we it's not just an act. Like I feel genuinely positive about this show. This is not just me trying to avoid the negative things going on. Now, if this was a conversation about join the Resistance, that would be
which it doesn't need to be
a different conversation. But no, I've genuinely liked this show.
That is the book series that you keep trying to talk me into finishing by telling me how bad it is.
And if you're an author of that, ignore everything we just said because we would love to talk to you about how great your series is.
How much we love it.
If your name is Acker or Blacker.
Or Blacker. Is lurking out there in the chat.
So, but the one thing, I think this is a fair time to bring this up, that I think both of us were concerned about with Resistance was the animation style.
Yes.
So we've talked a lot about story and character stuff, and I want to do more of that. But before we do, talk to me about your impressions of the animation, because that was something that both of us was anticipating would be a hang-up for us.
Right. It's not been as much of a hang-up as I was anticipating. Yeah. That said, even what we'd seen in the trailers, I always thought the ship animation was stunning.
Right.
It pretty much the locations look good. Anything that doesn't involve a facial expression, I think looks really good.
Right.
Even the way they animate it, it's very fluid, and I like how it works. I'm not sure if it's necessarily that the facial animations are getting better or are growing on me, or I'm just getting used to it, or whatever it is. But either way, it hasn't really held me back.
Right.
From watching the show. It's probably just because everything else is so good. I can kind of get over the one thing I wasn't super excited about.
Yeah.
It's just, for me, I don't like the lack of detail on the faces.
Yeah.
But that's not enough to keep me from liking the show, I guess.
Right.
But even then, the most recent episode, which this isn't really a spoiler because you can see what the pictures of the kids look like. But there's two children in the episode Children from Tahar.
Right.
And I thought they looked amazing, but they actually had like freckles, and they wanted to show that they had curly hair, so they put more detail into the hair. And then I thought those kids looked stunning.
Right.
And that's something where I wish we could see more of that, but I get that it's just the nature of the animation style.
Right. And with me, I kind of feel the same way, and I don't think I noticed this until you kind of pointed it out to me. But I think what it is about the faces is that the way they are shaded is that it's kind of singular toned. And I think a lot of times it comes across as a lack of detail just because depending on which way they're facing and the light that they're standing in, it's just one skin tone. But I think I noticed that less because the animation on everything else is so good.
Right.
Like I remember, not this most recent episode, but with last week's episode, I remember texting you how cool I thought the stun shots were from the stormtrooper's
Yes.
rifle.
Yeah, the
Like,
visual effects kind of animation has been great.
like it's so good, and like you said, the ships are so good, and I feel
Hmm.
like with a lot of the other creatures, I feel like their even facial animation is better. It's just
The tree
like,
frog turtles.
yeah, the tree frog turtles, but even like just the Ugnaught chef and like
Yeah,
the guy that runs the fish shop. I forget,
yeah.
but
I don't know if
like,
it's that guy. Yeah,
or like Aunt
the
Z.
yeah, yeah.
Like I feel like any non-human character's face is different because there are other things going on their face that they can animate,
Right.
and it's really
Yeah.
just the
Or
human
even like
characters that,
Miku's hat or something.
yeah. It's really, yeah, just kind of the human characters that get kind of that. I mean, I guess you'd say monotone because
Hmm.
it's one tone. Um, but yeah, so like the shading is used to like define facial features, but not to the extent that you get like lighting rendering and 3D animation. Um,
Right.
and I think it's different, but it definitely hasn't been the type of thing that has kept me from enjoying the show by any means so far. I just thought that was something we were both kind of concerned about.
Hmm.
Um,
See, and
Nolan wants us to go through and talk about the main characters. And I don't, but we can just kind of go through and talk about each of them, or we could
hmm
kind of talk about our favorite characters as a way of getting into
yeah,
that a little bit.
I will say I hate to be that person, but I do have. If you, I think I put it at least. Yeah, there's at least in the playlist that's in the description.
Mm-hmm.
If you look, there's a video that says Team Fireball and the Aces, and that kind of talks about some of the characters in the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can certainly talk about the main ones. And Midway, I see your comment there as well, and I would love to see them be able to do something like that, or as we heard in the most recent episode, just also to see some more movie characters show
Yeah.
up,
I tell you,
based off of one really big name drop.
the one, yeah, that's, well, yeah. There was a huge name drop, and I'll let B Man, if he's still in the chat, watch that for himself without
Yep.
spoiling it for him. But the one Legends character that I think makes most sense to show up in this show that I would love to see is
Mhm.
Talon Card. I think it makes a
Oh, that
lot
one.
of
Oh,
sense.
I didn't even think about that. That would be awesome.
I think it
Sorry.
makes so much sense for Talon Card to show up.
Oh, frick yeah.
In like because Card, at least to my knowledge, is not in new canon anywhere.
Not that I'm aware of, unless it was in like one of the adventure comics or something.
And I feel like with this just being kind of a random station somewhere, it would be so easy to just throw in an oblique reference, even
Or even
to the wild card or to Card
or
himself.
even like a name. It would be so easy to like add in kind of a side like Rogue Squadron guy, like maybe not Corran Horn,
Right.
but like somebody else from that. I think my favorite character out of that was always Face. I can't remember if Face is from Rogue Squadron or Wraith Squadron. It might be Wraith.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Wraith Squadron. Yeah.
But he was one of my favorites. But yeah, if we want to talk about favorite characters, I will say I've been very impressed by the kind of main character, which is Kazuda Xiono or Kaz. And considering I had a rocky start with Ahsoka, that
Yeah.
I've come around to really liking Ahsoka, and Ezra, our boy Space Aladdin, I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about. I really liked Kaz really quickly.
Yeah.
I think he's kind of interesting, and what I think for him, the reason why he works for me is he's older than Ahsoka
Yeah.
or Ezra. I mean, albeit both of them were Force sensitive, but like Kazuda is actually a young adult, and not by young adult, like I think he's if he's late teens, that's the youngest he is.
Right.
And so it's not like here I am, a kid going off to fight in the war and stuff. It's like he just feels age appropriate.
Right.
And so I kind of bonded it with him. But my real favorite character is his kind of best friend character, which is Niku,
Oh yeah.
who I was talking about before. He's the kind of alien guy. I think he's a. I'm gonna lose so much nerd cred trying to say what he is. I think he's a Nikto. I think he's a Nikto.
Yep. I'm pretty sure.
And he's great because he's so like I kind of described him like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, only without a murder streak. Like he just takes everything so literally.
Drax before his family was murdered.
Right,
by
exactly. Young
Ronan the
Drax.
Accuser.
New fan theory.
Yeah.
Niku is young Drax.
But so like um I like Kaz too, and I like Kaz more than I thought I would because,
Mhm.
like you said, I struggled with Ahsoka for a long time, and
Mhm.
I didn't like Ezra until he disappeared with space whales.
Yeah, literally. I remember watching that with you, and you and I were both like, "We take it back, Ezra. We take it all back."
like like Ezra was only ever interesting to me because of other things that were going on. Like
Right.
Ezra was interesting to me because Darth Maul was interesting to me,
Right.
or
Or
Ezra was
Kane.
interesting because Kanan was interesting. Like
Or Sabine.
like
Or what
never
have you.
on his own terms. But I also think that because Kaz is older, it gives
Yes.
him the opportunity to have more of a backstory. Like
Yes.
Ahsoka was brought to the temple as a child because that's what happened with
What Jedi
Jedi.
do.
And so like she didn't have like that was her backstory. Like there was nothing
Yeah.
else. And Ezra was orphan. Like
Mhm.
that was his main defining characteristic for at least the first season was Ezra has no parents. And
Right.
like that's important, but rather than just being an important part of his character, that was his character.
Mhm.
And that's like they've written Kaz differently, and I think it shows. Um,
Mhm.
but I love Niku too. Like it's hard. I mean I specifically have avoided a lot of like Twitter reaction to Resistance,
Mhm.
in no small part because I'm watching it after a lot of people are. So
Right.
I don't want to have stuff spoiled for me. But in my imagination, at least Twitter hates Niku in a way that I would find problematic. Um,
Right.
because I straight up love Niku. Like when Kaz shows up and is like, "Yeah, I'm the best pilot in the galaxy," and Niku takes that at face value. Like
He's
I
like,
love
oh
that so much. Like he's one of the greatest pilots ever because he said so.
yeah. I think the moment with Niku that really sold it for me is after Niku has told the entire station that Kaz is the best pilot in the galaxy and has like gotten this whole thing going on in the bar because he thinks Kaz is the best pilot. And then Kaz is like explaining to him that he like didn't mean it.
Yeah.
Niku's like, I have to go off now and contemplate this betrayal. And he like walks away. Like Kaz lied to it.
My favorite Niku moment so far was in last week's episode where he just walks up to the stormtroopers and like, my friend wants to know why you're here. Like Kaz is wanting to do some like clandestine investigation of why the First Order is on the station, and Niku just walks right up to him and says, "Hey, why are you guys here? My friend really wants to know."
It's even better because the radios are on, and then
Yep.
Kaz shows up, and like the radio feedback happens. It's like the most awkward encounter.
But
Oh,
it's so
good
hard
old
not to
Niku.
like Niku for me, um, and I feel like Niku is a type of innocent that Star
Yeah,
Wars doesn't get right very often.
right.
Like I feel like Jar Jar was meant to be what Niku is and
Yes,
wasn't. And
right.
and I think that's one of the reasons why he stands out so much is because it's just so well done. I
Mm-hmm.
think like it would be so easy to go over the top with him in a way that I don't think they do. Um,
Right. And I do think that works really well. And again, I think it's just because there's also kind of an appropriateness to this. Like Niku's not out trying to save the galaxy or caught up with Jedi Knights. He's a mechanic
yeah,
in a car shop.
right,
Like it's a
right,
little bit easier to kind of see it that way.
yeah,
And then we have the other kind of half of Team Fireball. We have Yeager, that I always want to say is Jaeger, but it's Yeager, and Tam. And I've liked Tam a lot more than I thought I was going to. I didn't think I was
yeah,
going to dislike Tam, but she just seemed like the other person that was there,
right,
and she was just going to be the one that's mad at Kaz.
right,
But I think it was in the episode I claimed was filler, where she's really mad at Kaz, and Yeager is like, give him a shot. I gave you a shot, and there's like this implication of a past there. And then in the Hightower episode, she's talking to the Hype character, and you can see that she kind of had this different kind of path and has ended up where she's at.
right.
And I'm just kind of interested to to know more about her.
Yeah.
But what I like about her is you talk about characters that Star Wars doesn't always get right. Tam is kind of like this character that Star Wars just she's like the obligatory sassy girl sidekick.
Right.
Like she's what, and I don't please don't take this as a slam on Sabine, but that's what Sabine was for
Right.
a long time before
Sure.
the Mandalore stuff kind of came in. Um, and you just kind of always have that character, and maybe it's not always a girl, but you always kind of have that character who's just there to be sassy.
Right.
And what I kind of think is different about Tam is she's not necessarily out there being better, right? Like, Ezra and Sabine had kind of a sibling rivalry. Tam gets mad at Kaz and she argues with Kaz, but she doesn't really want to prove herself to Kaz. She wants to prove herself to the station.
Right.
And so she just feels a little bit different, where it's like her sassiness isn't born out of banter or a rivalry. It's born out of she's just so over everything all of the time and kind of mad at everybody.
Right. Well, it's interesting to me too because I feel like we'll talk more about this at the end, I think. But you and I are reading the new Jedi Order series right now, and her personality reminds me a lot of Jaina Solo's personality, where she's just focused and driven, rather than just getting caught up in everybody else's stuff. Like she just knows what she's about and tries to pursue it. And I like her a lot. I feel like she's another character that they could have gone wrong with, but at least thus far have not. And with Yeager, I feel like there's so much we don't know about Yeager yet. Everything we know about Yeager we've learned kind of obliquely, through somebody else talking about Yeager. But by that same token, was he even in the last 2 episodes? Because I don't know that I remember seeing him. At least, like, I watched the most recent one this morning, and I don't remember him being in that episode at all.
He was, and I only remember that he even was because for my reviews I take screenshots and then I go through and name them so I can find them easier. And there was a screenshot I took that had Yeager in it, but he literally walked in the background. So when Kaz and Tam and Niku were all working on the ship,
right?
He literally walked and watched them argue and then walked away. So he wasn't even voiced; he was just there.
Right.
I can't remember if the same thing happened with the High Tower, but he's been around, and that's kind of the advantage you have in an animated show is you can kind of put the character in, but not necessarily need to pay the voice actor to show up, as long as he's in the background.
And then Nolan, to answer your question, the last sort of member of Team Fireball, apart from BB-8, who we're all familiar with, the other droid is Bucket. Bucket is the droid that's kind of mismatched and has the helmet.
Yep.
Because
we don't really know a lot about Bucket
now. We really don't. Or how he's made up, or who made him,
or anything about his personality. He's kind of that obligatory. The team needed a droid character.
Yeah.
It almost feels like he was there, and then they figured out BB-8 was going to be there a lot, and then BB-8 has stolen his thunder.
Yep. Yeah,
but I don't really know.
I think we would know a lot more about Bucket if BB-8 weren't there. That said, I love BB-8, so I won't complain too much.
I'm not complaining either.
And another thing, I'm really glad that the show has made this more explicit in a way that the only discussion on this online is bound to not be a good one. But I love how they're upfront with BB-8 being she. I just love that little detail that they've worked in a couple times, and I'm sure certain portions of Twitter are less pleased with that than I am.
Actually, I haven't seen a whole lot about that, but I don't run in a lot of the nastier circles.
What about the other characters, the aces? So we really haven't seen. There's the one episode, The High Tower, which was about the Aces Lounge in part. And we saw the Rhodian character whose name I kind of forget. And
Hype Phazon.
Yeah, and then the other character that's kind of got a side deal with the First Order.
Yeah.
And then Captain Doza's daughter. But like we really haven't gotten a whole lot of the aces. Like we've seen them, in their squad stuff to protect the station. We've gotten a few character moments here and there, but apart from that, we really don't know a whole lot about them.
Yeah, right now there's more of a thing that Kaz and Cam both are kind of aspiring to be, rather than like characters themselves. Tora has probably been in it more than anyone else.
Right.
But that's another thing I've been pleasantly surprised on, because usually, when these characters show up, they're just there to kind of be non-evil antagonists.
Right.
And they really haven't been that way. And the show would just be cluttered with that too.
Right.
I think that whatever Elijah Wood's character's name was, Jace. It was Jace, because I kept thinking of Jace from the X-Men books.
Right.
He is kind of gonna hopefully come back and be kind of like this rival character, but they haven't, like, with all the other things that are going on in the show right now, it's been nice that they haven't tried to shoehorn that in.
Right.
And it's more that they're just a constant presence, but they're more of a goal than a blockage, I guess.
Right. I also really like that, to the extent that we've seen Tora, and like there's like the story has kind of teased with her being a romantic interest for Kaz. I'm glad they haven't leaned into that too much.
Right.
Because it would be very easy, I think, to have a love triangle thing with Tora, Tam, and Kaz, and I'm glad they have not gone that route, at least not yet.
Right.
And I did love the moment in the high tower, though, where Kaz comes into Tora's quarters and she's like, "Look, I appreciate it, but I'm not into you."
And he's like, okay.
Hey, Yagi hanging out in the chat. Yagi, thanks for participating in our art challenge last week.
Yes, that was fun.
We'll shout that out, too. Any other thoughts about the aces, though? I just feel like we don't really know a whole lot about them yet.
I think the main thing is I just want to know more about the Keldor one.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, like, even in the video about the aces, it doesn't seem like he even talks much.
Yeah.
And it always makes him mysterious. Yeah, hopefully we see more of them. I think as eventually conflict comes to the station, we'll see more of them.
Yeah.
Because what's interesting about them is they're racers, but they're also warriors.
Right. Yeah. And I'm surprised, too. I feel like racing is kind of the backdrop of the show, but it hasn't featured more prominently in like the storylines in most of the episodes. And I kind of like that it's always going on kind of in the background. But not every episode has been a "does Kaz beat this person in a race this week" kind of thing, which is another thing I kind of thought the show might be from the start. Another thing we can talk about is we've seen a lot of the First Order in this show so far. We've seen Captain Phasma, we've seen Starkiller Base, we've seen 2 different colored varieties of stormtroopers. We've got the Red Baron character and the Gold Trooper character, whose names you know better than I do.
The gold one is Pyre, and I literally just always refer to the other one. I have it.
Captain Von Trapp.
Captain Von Trapp, yeah. I have it, his name only because I DM'd it to you earlier. It's Elric Von Reg.
Yep. It reminds me of Ulrich von Liechtenstein from the Knight's Tale, the Heath Ledger movie. That's. But I thought the show has done a really good job too of giving us just enough of the First Order. But what do you think about that? We've seen a lot of, and again, don't want to spoil too much, but we had a big First Order name drop in the last episode
First Order
too.
name drop. So first of all, seeing Phasma has been great, and Phasma has been voiced by Gwendolyn Christie, who plays her in the films. So it's just been really fun to have her there, and it, like it's so much better when it's Gwendolyn's voice
Right.
because like I know she just feels like a punk to so many people who watch the movies, but I don't know about you, but when Captain Phasma's there, I'm terrified
Yep.
because I don't know what she's gonna do. Um, and just hearing her voice, I'm just instantly shaking in my boots.
Yeah.
Uh, and then seeing Starkiller Base, of course, shows us just how close we are to The Force Awakens. I believe the show's supposed to be set about 6 months before.
Right.
To get really kind of nerdy on you for a second, I kind of wonder if Pyre, the Gold Trooper, is a replacement for Cardinal.
Maybe so.
Because in the Phasma novel, it. I don't know if it was explicitly said or if it was heavily implied, but it seemed like it was like only Phasma and Cardinal were special.
Right. I'm pretty sure
And
it was
then
explicit.
yeah, and now we have the Red Baron, who is also red. And I don't know if he was always a thing and maybe pilot stormtroopers were different, or if, like, now that Cardinal's gone, they're like, let's have more crazy colors. And yes, Yagi, the gold stormtrooper, is specific to this show.
At least as far as we know.
As far as we know. At least so far, he's only appeared in the show. He'll probably appear in other things.
My favorite thing about the Gold Trooper is that he has a gold-plated blaster rifle too.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty baller.
Yeah.
Um,
he gets all the way into it.
I also wonder. So this is, I don't mean to be negative, of course, but like when we see stormtroopers on the station, they're only ever like 2 or 3 of them. And I just wonder if it's the same 2 or 3 troopers that just keep getting sent back. It's like, yeah, we were there on Tuesday, but now we're back again. More shenanigans.
Or maybe they keep requesting to go back because they really like the bar or something.
Yeah. But I thought too it would be easy to, you know how like when you're playing the KOTOR games and you're at a location, you know, like they'll have like different areas sectioned off, and like this is the Zerka area of this level, and this is the, you know, and I feel like it would be really easy to just have set it up where this area was like the secret First Order area on the station, and I feel like they give us just enough of the First Order stuff to remind us why the First Order is important, and to like give us the big First Order stuff to show that, one, when this happens, like you said with Starkiller Base, but also to like show us how important whatever's going on the station is, because like Captain Phasma is important enough to the First Order that if something big wasn't going on Colossus, then like you'd get somebody else besides Captain Phasma. Like Captain Phasma is high enough in the pecking order that it shows that there's something going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, McYagi, he might have won that $1.5 billion Powerball and just tricked out his armor.
He bet on the right thing at the right race or something.
Yeah.
But speaking of the First Order, there's kind of a big thing everyone's been talking about related to that. We've been told that there's a mole of sorts, and like Kazuda his job is to spy, right, on the Colossus to find First Order sympathizers. And so there's been a lot of speculation on Star Wars Twitter as to like who this person is. What do you have thoughts on that, or do you think we know who that is already? Or
well, I think there are a couple of people that are being set up as potential moles. I think the most obvious one, which is why I don't think is Captain Doza, the leader of the station. And I think there's probably less people that think he might be the mole after the last episode or two. Because like you and I were talking about before we started, his regular communications with Phasma, I think, would be a little more obvious if he was the mole. Like there's no reason when they're just talking to each other for him not to be identified as the mole. I also think that there's a lot of speculation, at least, that that Yeager might be the mole, just because of his reluctance to help Poe to start with and his just general standoffishness. But at the same time, I don't know why he would have agreed to help Kaz at all if he was working for the First Order. And my other theory is that it could be Bucket, who has either been intentionally or accidentally programmed. Like we were saying, we just don't know a whole lot about Bucket. So I feel like if there is a mole, the extent to which there is one, I don't think it's going to be someone that is actively, like, intentionally working for the First Order the way that Kaz is working for the Resistance. I think most of the people on the station are there because they don't have a lot of other options. And I think it'll be somebody that's working for the First Order because their family's in danger or because they're trying to have enough food this week. I don't think it's going to be like a secret First Order operative that was implanted in the station the way that Kaz was for the Resistance.
And to that point, I kind of wonder, like you were saying with Captain Doza's interactions, I mean, he does contact, spoilers for the most recent episode, I suppose, but not hardcore ones. He does contact the First Order to tell them that the children are there. But he does it in a way that's very much like, if I tell you this, will you be nicer to us? Like, it's not necessarily even out of fear. It's very much a negotiations thing. I've seen on Twitter, there are some people who think it might end up being Niku, but by accident. Like, there's a First Order contact that just asks Niku, and because he's Niku, he just, like, tells him everything. Which I could see. There are a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people who think Yeager. My kind of, like, dark horse selection is actually Tora, which is why she's on the slide, and I could see it being not necessarily because she wants to be in the First Order per se, but, like, I just think if Captain Doza is the red herring, then his daughter is like you wouldn't necessarily pick her, right? Like, they could make all the evidence lead towards the Doza home, but then it's really her. She's also very competitive. She very much wants to be the best. I could see her seeing the First Order as a way of, like, being better than a racer on a crummy station. Not necessarily that she's a believer in an ideology, but sees them as an opportunity. Because I don't necessarily think she's evil, unless she's really playing up the sweetness. But I think Niku would be, like, Niku being bad would be too much, and Niku being an accidental mole would be overdoing what we said they were doing right. But I think Tora would be the kind of betrayal if they wanted to do a betrayal. Which, I mean, Yeager would be that too, but again, I just don't see the motivation for helping Kaz.
Well, I just think, personally, I think if it was Tora, I think we would, like, have seen more of her thus far. And the fact that there have been episodes that she didn't show up in makes me wonder about that. But like I said, there have been episodes where Yeager was barely in them. If at all. So, like, I really don't know. I have a hard time kind of wrapping my mind around this, because, like, part of me wants to do that sort of thing and kind of break down where who is the most likely, like, from a TV writing perspective, and my gut tells me if that's the way they're going, that it's Yeager, because Yeager seems to be the one that's, like,
the most drama if it was him.
But at the same time, like you said, like, and we've talked about this in other places too, but, like, the First Order is so ideologically driven in a way that even the Empire wasn't. That I think if it was going to be this person is a mole because they espouse First Order ideology, we would have a better sense of that by now. And the fact that we don't makes me think that it's not a pure First Order kind of person.
And I kind of wonder if, I mean, I don't feel like the show at any point in time has told us there's a mole. I think Kaz has thought that. And I think it could just be a case of Kaz being wrong. And, like, maybe there isn't a mole. Like, maybe he turns in Captain Doza at some point and then realizes, oh crap, I didn't turn in a mole. I turned in a guy that was just trying to, negotiate to keep his people alive.
Right.
And we can have that. But I'm kind of in the opposite camp of you in some ways. Not necessarily in theorizing. Like, I wouldn't say I suspect or I think if there is a mole that it's going to be like a real first order person, like that really believes the ideology. Like, it's less of I see evidence for that and more of I would like to see that. And just for no other reason than I think it would be really interesting to see Kaz, who is so idealistic in his beliefs, have to deal with somebody who's idealistic in different beliefs.
Right.
But I mean, they could also serve that same purpose not through a mole, and they could do that with someone else.
Sure.
So that is a thing I would like to see, and the most obvious way to do it would be through this mole.
Right.
But if they don't do it that way, then they don't do it that way.
Well, and like you say, we really don't have strong evidence that there has to be a mole in the first place. Like, the only mole we've seen was working for the pirates.
Right.
And really even Poe puts Kaz on the station so that he can report about First Order activity, of which there has been a fair amount. But he doesn't say, I'm putting you here so that you can identify, an intel source that we think is coming from this station.
Right, exactly.
So it very well could be that that whole discussion is kind of moot.
Yeah.
If
I think that's kind of like a smaller scale version of the Rey's identity debate, where so many of us, myself included, were convinced that there was a Rey identity, but not because there was one, but because Rey wanted one.
Right.
And so, to a lesser extent, like maybe we're all looking for a mole because Kaz wants a mole.
Right. That's fair enough. The one other thing that I wanted to talk about before we get close to time was that in a show called Resistance, we haven't seen a whole lot of
the Resistance. Yeah.
I mean, which is fair. We had a show called Rebels that didn't show the Rebel Alliance proper, for a while. But we have seen BB-8, of course, which we've already talked about, is there in every episode. But from the start, we saw Leia, and we've had Poe at various times, and we got Elo, which I think is who that person in the last episode was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that? Either the particulars of seeing Leia or BB-8, or just sort of the absence of the larger Resistance in a show called Resistance.
Well, I mean, I know Leia's coming back because we've in the trailer for the show, Leia has lines.
Sure.
Which she didn't have in the pilot, and they've said that it's not that they were cut from the pilot; it's just they were lines not from the pilot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's almost like they're just saying, well, Kaz and BB-8 are in the Resistance, so they count as the Resistance.
Right.
I don't know that it's necessarily bothered me because I don't know what else you would call the show.
Sure.
Like Star Wars Racer Spy. Like, I don't know. But
I really want a show called Star Wars Racer
Star Wars
Spy.
Racer Spy. This is why they should let me write Star Wars. But I think that you can tell I'm tired. I think that it could also tie in a little bit to where the show might go from here. So we've kind of said a couple times now that the show's set for 6 months before The Force Awakens.
Sure.
And in The Force Awakens, we see the Hosnian system destroyed by Starkiller Base. And we know Kaz is from the Hosnian system. So at some point in time, presumably, we're going to watch Kaz deal with his homeworld being destroyed, which is certainly going to change the tone of the show.
Right.
But I feel like we might see more of resistance and combat if the show should ever coincide with the films. And even today, I was thinking, we keep talking about, is the show going to, catch up to The Force Awakens? But if it catches up to The Force Awakens, it's caught up to The Last Jedi.
Yep.
And so then we're almost going to have like an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. thing where we have a season with S.H.I.E.L.D. and then it's like, just kidding, S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't exist anymore. Now we're agents, but they never rebranded the show. But we could kind of have that too, where there isn't a resistance anymore but it's more about them refounding the Resistance.
Right.
And I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's kind of what I'm hoping the show eventually becomes.
Well, I kind of thought that at some point too, it would kind of more catch up with like the Resistance proper, which I honestly don't know how they would do without changing the setting. And, and like, you know, we saw Rebels, you know, leave Lethal for a long time. But it feels like Colossus is more important to Resistance than Lethal was to Rebels.
At least from the get-go.
Yeah. So I don't really know what that dynamic would be like if they left the station. But thinking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it would be really interesting to me if the timing worked out. So one of the things we're talking about too is we don't really know how many episodes have been ordered for season 1. But if
I mean, maybe we do, but I don't personally.
I don't either. But if it's like a full run season that lasts like into next spring, and then we get another season that starts next fall.
Yep.
When episode 9 comes out,
it'll be during the holiday break.
Yeah, and whatever happens in episode 9 could change what's going on in Resistance, the way that that Winter Soldier changed what was going on in S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yep.
You know, because after Winter Soldier, S.H.I.E.L.D., you know, just had to change because of what happened. I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but it's been out for a while, so that's kind of on you.
So yeah, and it's not even our channel, so
yeah. But like I can imagine like the show getting up to like the events of The Force Awakens and therefore The Last Jedi, and then like changing, whether it's a time shift or it's a place shift, to kind of account for whatever happens in episode 9.
And I think a lot of that will depend on, we obviously have no idea now how far or how long after The Last Jedi episode 9 will take place.
30 years.
30 years. Just jumps again.
They've recast everyone.
So that's how we got Baldo Ren.
Yeah.
He's just that old. And 10 Raylos unsub right there.
But like I can just see like a shot of like Kaz like hearing, like getting the distress calls from the Resistance from The Last Jedi and not being able to respond, and then the show jumping after a winter break or something like that. I think that would be a bold thing to do with an animated show. But I could, it's not outside the realm of possibility.
It isn't, especially with what we've seen in the other shows before. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is they put this show, albeit on a kids channel, but on a kids channel it's 10 p.m. like when it airs on TV. And I don't know if that's because they knew the vast majority of the audience was just going to watch it through the app anyway. So when it aired, didn't matter. I mean, I've been watching it through the app, or mostly because I'm asleep at 10 p.m. but
I am too, but for different reasons.
For different reasons.
I'm just old.
I'm a little bit. I'm in a few more sleep cycles or REM cycles by 10 o'clock than you are. But I kind of wonder if it's that, or do they intend for the show to get more mature down the line?
Yeah. Speaking of watching it on the app, my last question for you before we kind of start to wrap things up is, have you seen as many ads for Ralph Breaks the Internet as I have while watching Resistance? Because I feel like of the three the three ads that I get during every commercial break while watching on the app, like two of them are for Ralph Breaks the Internet.
I mostly just get DuckTales over and over and over again.
If you've seen this ad, you're very familiar, but there's a Ralph Breaks the Internet ad where they like overfeed a rabbit to the point of exploding and a child screams in the back of the car. And I've seen that ad like
so many times,
like dozens of times in the span of however many episodes we want to say that there are now.
No, I get like DuckTales and some really terrible looking Disney Channel show with children in it over and over.
That narrows it down.
Right. So one of any Disney Channel show that's not animated.
I don't know. We're in different markets, but I just get Wreck-It Ralph ads these days.
Okay.
Um, but
Maybe it's because I made my Disney Go avatar Donald Duck, so they're like, just send her DuckTales.
must want the DuckTales.
All the DuckTales. Woo!
I mean, we did elect Scrooge McDuck president for whatever that counts. But um, that's too mean to Scrooge McDuck. I'm sorry. But I'm glad we had a chance to talk about Rebels. We haven't, or not Rebels, but Resistance.
Resistance.
We haven't really, like I said, had a long form discussion about it in a while.
Yeah.
So if you want more of this, we could do more of this. But we've been doing our weekly reviews that YB has been putting out. So make sure you're checking those out. Those have been going up on Sunday. So you can kind of get that right as the episode comes out, which is what I do. I watch the episode, then I watch your review of it. Pushing up those likes. And if there's others like Resistance specific things you'd like for us to talk about, either on a StreamCast or in a video, make sure if you leave it in a suggestion on Twitter in the comments, we're happy to talk about whatever things you're curious about, whether it's with Resistance or other Star Wars topics.
Should we tell the people what we're going to talk about next week?
I think we should. You wanna take that?
So we've alluded to, I think, the last two streamcasts. You've probably seen, if you follow me at least on Twitter. I've been tweeting about this, but we're endeavoring to read the New Jedi Order. So Django read it in the days of his youth, and has read it all the way through. I read it also in days of my youth, but not as the books were coming out. And I only made it about halfway through, and not for disliking. I was enjoying them, but I went to college and I just didn't have time to read about everyone dying. I just couldn't handle it anymore. But we're gonna tackle it and kind of get back into it. So we're both reading Vector Prime. I'm like 2 days overdue for finishing Vector Prime, so I'm gonna try to finish that today. But next week we're going to talk about Vector Prime for sure, and we're gonna start reading the New Jedi Order, and actually releasing, either doing more streamcasts, maybe releasing some content on it, and kind of talking about our thoughts. And our hope is that if you have read it, you talk to us about it. If you haven't read it or don't know much about it, they're Legends novels and not in current canon. Definitely not in current canon.
Yeah.
Definitely not compatible with current canon at all. But we want to make it seem more accessible, which is really hard when it's a 19 novel series and not kids chapter book series. It's a 19 novel series, 19.
By a lot of different authors too.
By a lot of authors that summarily reference everything that had been written in Legends up until that point. But we're going to show you can still read them. Yep. Darn it. But next week we're going to talk about that. And then we haven't decided if we're going to talk about every book, if major things in the book, how we're going to do it. But we're definitely going to talk about Vector Prime because it's the first one.
I mean, and this is going to be like a almost, if not for sure, like year-long undertaking that we're doing here. So we're not looking at doing this quickly. So if you wanted to do it with us, there's no pressure to like read 3 books a week or something like that.
Right.
But at the same time, this is something that we're going to be doing for a while. So if it's something you care about, you may want to get into it, just because every couple of streamcasts at least we're going to be talking about some NJO stuff, and we're going to have other videos along the way. So this is something that we have kind of been planning and talking about for a while, and it's going to be like a big undertaking because of the number of novels, but also just a big like block of content that you're going to see from our channel for the next several months at least.
Because if we read a book, like, I don't even know. I mean, I did tweet out a reading schedule, which is only accurate through January. But if you check my Twitter, you might be able to find it.
I mean, I thought it was pretty specific personally, but you know.
If you could see the number of times it's just mostly me yelling at Django for strange things he sends me and telling him no. Like reading Children of the Jedi 5 times.
I mean, who wouldn't want to though? I mean, any real Star Wars fan would want to read Children of the Jedi 5 times. and one of them was just the good parts. So,
and I know what parts you mean by just the good parts.
Was just the good parts with a Marvin Gaye record playing in the background.
And then I like the one you're like, and then every Karen Travis clone trooper.
And I even threw
just to put my positivity to a test.
I even threw the Cestus Deception in there just for you.
I knew you did. It's almost kinkier than Children of the Jedi.
I've never even read the Cestus Deception.
You know, then I can't. I don't think the maturity rating is high enough on our channel for me to describe what happens in that
book. But so this is something we're going to be doing for a while, and we wanted to kind of yeah, Legends used to be pretty lewd, at least in part, and canon is too if you read Lost
Stars.
Yep.
There are a couple of points where I'm like, wait, does this say Star Wars on the front? I'm not sure. Claudia Gray.
I mean, the closest you get in Aftermath is Singer saying, "I'm definitely not into you."
Right, yeah.
But Yagi, we'll tell you after the stream.
Yep.
We'll message you a Wikipedia article you can read.
Away from the children.
Yeah, not the Children of the Jedi though. Oh. But we kind of wanted to announce this. I'm excited about it, honestly.
I am really excited that we're finally doing it. Yeah, I've been meaning to do it for a while.
I started reading it with Star by Star. I started reading it as it came out, so that was like 7 books in.
It's definitely point. Yeah, and then I think the series started in '99, right?
Yeah. And like I saw just the other day, like maybe even yesterday, was like the 15th anniversary of the Unifying Force.
Yeah, so which is crazy.
It's been a long time since this was over, but it was important all the way up through the end of Legends canon when that got axed in like 5 years ago now, almost 5 years ago. So like it used to be a big deal, and it's not necessarily in canon anymore, but it's something that we kind of wanted to do together, and we wanted to kind of involve you in that process too. So we're not going to put out a strict reading schedule because we don't want to hold ourselves to too strict of a reading schedule because life stuff happens. But if
as well as other new canon books coming out,
right, and we don't want to do this at the expense of other stuff. But and especially some of the stuff coming out in the spring, like the Master and Apprentice novel, and the Queen's Shadow, the Padme novel, and stuff like that. But we wanted to let you know about it because we're excited about it, and in case you wanted to read or reread any of this with us, you kind of have a chance to do that.
And get caught up. Yep.
So next week is going to be Vector Prime. It's the first of the series, and I for one have a lot to say about it, and so I'm looking forward to that. I definitely do too. Yeah. And very, very tentatively and vaguely, I will also say that the week after that will be a StreamCast you don't want to miss.
Right. I'm too suspicious to say why, but
it's one that I'm even more excited about than Vector Prime.
Yep, me too.
So we will leave it at that with that teaser. If you're watching that, and maybe we'll once we get closer, we'll leave you some more hints about that maybe, and let you try to figure it out. But I think for the most part, that's gonna do it for us today. You can find us on all the places. You know the drill. The tweets and the faces, books, and the YouTubes and the blog sites. You know where all that is. If not, you can see it on the screen and find us basically in all the places. So make sure you're following us there. Make sure if you're on YouTube that you're subscribed and you're liking the video. And if you hit that notification bell, you will be notified when we go live on our very regular and consistent schedule.
It's always the same day and same time all the time.
Yep. So.
Oh, and Andy, thank you for subscribing. I just got your notification.
Oh, that's great. So make sure you're plugged into us with all the places, and we will see you. I think we're planning on Wednesday next week. So
Wednesday next week, but also probably at 4 Eastern, like today.
Yeah.
Not for sure. I will try to be diligent at actually scheduling it. But yeah, Wednesday, probably 4 Eastern next week.
So you can catch us then for our Vector Prime discussion, and we will see you later.
Bye.
Bye.